Welcome to our November 2021 NOWW reading. We are on the Robinson Superior Treaty territory, and the land on which that we gather, at least the Thunder Bay portion of it, is part of the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and specifically the Fort William First Nations. I also want to start off by thanking the Ontario Arts Council. Their funds to create an opportunity for us to be able to provide these readings. With that acknowledgement and that recognition of the OAC, I will pass over operations of this evening's event to Sue Blott, who is graciously going to run our reading tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Charles. Okay, our theme this month is sunshine, moonlight, and darkness. And following is an excerpt from Indian Horse by Richard Wagamese that I chose to kind of reflect the theme. The quote is this: "Hockey is like the universe, Saul," he said one day. "When you stand in the dark and look up at it, you see the placid fire of stars. But if we were right in the heart of it, we'd see chaos, comets churning by, meteorites, star explosions, things being born, things dying. Chaos, Saul. But that chaos is organized." And with that, I'd like to move into the readers. Tonight's readers are Donna White, Elizabeth Pszczolko, and Peter Fergus-Moore. And thank you very much to all of them for stepping up to share their work with us. Really, really appreciate it. Our first reader is Donna White. Donna is the author of the Stones trilogy. An avid traveler, she enjoys visiting other countries and experiencing everything each culture has to offer. From interviewing former child soldiers in Gulu, Uganda, to celebrating Shubho Noboroshu in Chittagong, Bangladesh, and sitting amongst a troop of chimpanzees in the rainforest, Donna embraces every experience to the maximum. Her writing takes on a very serious role to reveal situations in the world that aren't regarded as newsworthy, but should be. She resides in Canada with her husband, children, dogs, cats, and horses on their hobby farm in northwestern Ontario. And you can visit her website at www.donnawhitebooks.com. Are you good there, Donna?
Yeah. I didn't know that was me. I'm going to read an excerpt, the first two chapters from my latest book. It's called Selling Katie. It's a young adult book, and it's geared towards teen girls, 14 years or more. And when you asked, for sunshine, dark, and moonshine, I thought this is dark. This is definitely a dark topic. And right now, I've been sending out queries, and I have a little game I'm playing with the queries. I'm waiting to get my 30th rejection. So it's one of those stories that it's going to be a hard sell, but I think it needs to get out there. So anyways, I will start reading. It's Selling Katie, Chapter 1. Now. Katie wiped the tear streaks of mascara away with the back of her hand, then lifted her shirt and saw the bruise. When did this all become normal? She squeezed a few drops of cover-up onto her fingers from her nearly empty tube. She'd have to get more the next time she went shopping. She rubbed the concealer across the blue welt and winced. Stop acting like a princess. Her words were whispered, but the resolve in her voice made her draw in a deep breath and square her shoulders. Staring into the bathroom mirror, she stuck out her tongue. That's better. She pulled her blonde wig off, and her long red hair clung to her scalp. Next, she returned her blue contacts to the small curved dishes marked Kathy. Several back combs and a few sprays of volumizer, and her red locks were back to normal. She stared at the dark, sunken half-moons cradling her pale green eyes. Her pronounced cheekbones exaggerated her thin face. Taking a face cloth from a towel rack, she ran it under the hot water tap and pressed it to her face, absorbing every ounce of its softness and warmth. She sighed. She wiped away the remaining black streaks and dabbed some cover-up under her eyes, working it in with quick strokes. After reapplying the mascara, she added some blush and then put on some lipstick. Bright red. Passion red. Walking into her room, she sifted through her clothes in the top drawer of the dresser that supported the broken TV. Black bra, see-through white blouse, short red leather skirt. She dressed and put her black heels on, then sat on the edge of her bed. Her phone read 12:15 p.m. 5 minutes. Her stomach growled, and she thought of apple pies, the small pastries in the green boxes from McDonald's, the ones that said caution, filling is hot, as if everyone was an idiot, the ones that were her favorite since her first trip to the restaurant with her mom and dad, when they were still together. Maybe she would get one with her lunch today, along with a Big Mac and fries. Maybe. It all depended on if she made enough, and his mood. Always his mood. Today was a busy day. So far. She did the math in her head. 12 times 200 plus tips. The first guy gave 20. The second and third didn't bother. But the guy with the red tie dropped a 50 on the counter. Fifth gave nothing. Sixth was cheap, and seventh. She totaled it without any difficulty. $2,570. She always had a head for numbers. She would have to take in a couple more customers to make it a good day, though. She scrolled through her phone. No more dates after the 12:20. But that could change any time. She scanned the hotel room. It was her first day here. She could play her game. She almost smiled. 1 queen-size bed. 4 legs equals 4 points. 1 dresser. 6 legs equals 6 points. 1 table. 2 chairs. 1 suitcase stand and 1 nightstand. A total of 30 points. Her mind jumped with the opportunity and took off. 30. There were 30 songs in the Beatles' White Album. The atomic number of zinc was 30. Marty McFly went back 30 years in Back to the Future. There were 30 upright stones that made up the outer Saracen circle at Stonehenge. And 30 was a Harshad number, a number divisible by the sum of its digits. The next Harshad numbers were 36, 40, 42, 45, 48, 50, 54. Maya's laugh echoed in her ears. Will you please stop it? You're showing off. We all know you're a genius, Einstein. She pictured Maya last year, sitting beside her in their 10th grade math class, rolling her eyes, teasing and laughing. It was a wonderful sound, because it happened before they grew apart, before they stopped being friends, before everything spiraled out of control. She caught a tear before it escaped down her cheek. No. If she was going to get through this with any sanity left, there were rules that had to be followed, and she broke rule number 4. She said it out loud, using the volume to engrave it deeper into her brain. The past does not exist. Do not think or talk about home or family or friends. The pain is not worth it. She almost snorted in contempt. For someone so smart, why had she been so stupid? What was she thinking? Deep down, she knew something wasn't right, but she ignored it. And why? Why, Katie? Why'd you do it? She walked to the hotel window and looked out as a young couple holding hands walked to a car in the parking lot. Because you're like any teenage girl, Katie. You only wanted to be loved, and that's where it started. A knock came from the door, and she opened it. Tammy? The man asked. Yes, Katie said, her voice slying sexy. Come on in. Now, chapter 2, and the subtitle is Before. Katie put her earbuds in and stepped onto the bus. It was definitely a Beatles morning, but something loud and heavy enough to drown out all the drama she was going to have to endure in the 11th grade. She tapped Spotify on her phone and selected the Beatles' White Album. Helter Skelter or Back in the USSR? She tapped both. She would need all the help she could get. She threw her pack onto a seat in the middle of the bus and sat, then leaned her head against the window and sighed. If only she could go to an all-boys school in Thunder Bay. Sure, it would be weird, one girl with a few hundred boys. But in an all-boys school, there wouldn't be all the love triangles and the tea. Boys don't do drama. Who cared who was going with who? What did it matter if A broke up with B and B was now seeing C while A was plotting to dish C? There was enough of that going on in the real world. Why bring it to school? She opened the window and the morning air blew the strands of hair back from her face. She breathed it in, somewhat frost-like, somewhat warm, and yet still undecided. The bus drove through the older neighborhood of Westport, past Vickers Park, where the elm and maple trees showed hints of gold and red. The bus turned a corner and stopped, and more students filed on. Maya threw her backpack beside Katie, leaned across and closed the window. God, it's cold out there, Katie. Why don't you walk if you like it that much? Good morning to you too. Katie pulled out her earbuds. So how come you didn't show up at the Black Rose last night? You saw my text. What? You weren't serious, were you? Yeah, why not? Come on, Katie, it's old. How young were we when we started that? 3rd grade? We're going into the 11th grade now. No, we started it in 2nd, when we heard we were going to be stuck with Mr. T's class. You remember, the old teacher with the killer breath? Yeah, 2nd grade, 9 years ago. We don't need to go to some pretend haunted house to face those childish fears. It's bad enough we went there in 9th and 10th, but not now. We'll be graduating next year. We're not kids anymore. Katie glanced at Maya and then stared out the window. I didn't think it was childish. Just thought it was our tradition, that's all. Something only you and I do. Sit on the floor, light the candles, chant some silly spells, and chase our fears for the next school year. I know it's all weird and all, but Maya sighed. Yeah, I get it. I'm sorry. I should have come. How about tonight then, when it's dark out? Katie smiled. Okay, we'll do it tonight, if it's not too late. But don't come crying to me when you find out they've made a mistake, and you have to endure seeing Mr. Crip-Face Carter for homeroom every day. Maya laughed. What makes you think it'll happen to me? Maybe you'll be jinxed. They looked out the window as a flurry of bright yellow ribbons caught their attention. 2 women tacked posters and wrapped ribbons around each of the poles that lined the boulevard. Isn't that Marie's mom? Maya asked. Yeah, she's been putting posters of Marie all over the city. It's been a year since she disappeared, Katie said, biting her lip. I wonder if they'll ever find her. I still think she ran away, Katie said. My mom knows a friend of her mom's, and she said they had an argument, and Marie packed her suitcase and left. Must have been some fight then. I know I get mad at my mom, but I don't think I could be mad at her forever. You? Me? No, I don't think so. It'd have to be something real serious. Katie turned in her seat to take another look at the poster of Marie, showing her long brown hair, brown eyes, and round face. She was actually kind of pretty. She imagined the pain Marie's mother must be going through at that moment, wondering where her daughter was, if she was Kay, if she was alone and scared, or if she was even alive. She's probably enjoying the high life right now, away from all the rules of home and school, Maya laughed. She's probably changed her hair color and looks totally different now, so nobody would recognize her. I don't know, just thinking. Maybe, Katie said. I don't know. The bus pulled to the curb and the driver opened the door while Katie looked out the window and smiled. Just one more year after this, and then we have Freedom. She paused and spaced her words out for emphasis. I can't wait. Yeah, Maya said as she tossed her head, allowing her long blonde hair to fall over her shoulders. A cute boy walked past the bus, but in the meantime, we have some serious eye candy to watch. You go right ahead. Blonde hair and blue eyes gets the prize, you always say. Yes, but redhead knocks 'em dead. Katie pulled her long red hair over her face and put her arms out like a zombie, and Maya laughed. They walked off the bus into the school. Katie scrolled through her phone. We're in Mr. Blim's class for homeroom, and that is, oh my God, I have died and gone to heaven. Look at Thomas Lundstrom. He's even hotter than last year. Katie looked in the direction Maya was staring. Really? He looks like he got his hair done at Mr. Lube. Maya pushed her way through the crowd. Maya, what are you doing? She followed, then hung back. Maya stopped where Thomas was leaning against a wall and sidled up. Hey, Thomas. Hey, Maya. Nice tan. Summer's been good to you. You too, Maya smiled. Katie rolled her eyes and sighed. Not again. Maya pulled a paper from her jeans pocket. Did you know Mr. Nash for algebra last year? Yeah, he's pretty cool, actually. Thomas glanced at Maya's schedule. You have him first period. You'll like him. Seriously? Yeah. Every Friday, he would take out his electric guitar and play a few songs. He's pretty good. Retro stuff like Queen, Metallica, AC/DC, Rider, even new stuff like Chew Dog and 40 Links. Sometimes he put the lyrics up and we would sing too. It was different, but cool. Really? Yeah, and sometimes Jordan and Max brought their guitars and played. Great times. Hopefully he'll do it again this year. Maya nodded. Yeah, sure. Sounds fun. The bell rang and Thomas and Maya walked up the set of stairs to the second floor. Katie followed. Maya stopped at a door leading to a classroom. We'll see you around, Thomas. See you around, Maya. He walked down the hall, stopped, turned and smiled. Maya smiled back. Katie gave her the not too impressed look. Well, that didn't take you long. I know, God, he's cute, but... Maya watched a boy walk by and sighed. But what? Do you think I can do better? Much better. But maybe you should hold out until lunch before you make your wedding plans. Maya looked at her, hurt expression on her face. Come on, Katie. It's 11th grade. We're supposed to have fun. Be free. Do some shopping, you know? I know, but I just don't want to limit my choices to a bargain bin at some discount store when I can wait for something better. I mean, high school boys are so immature. They're either rednecks or hockey jocks or gaming nerds. I'll wait for something better. They took a table in the back of the room as two girls sat on either side of them. They were obviously new to the school. Westgate High wasn't that big not to recognize everyone, whatever grade they were in. The taller of the two girls spoke. Thin, straight blonde hair, brown eyes, and perfect teeth. I think I'm going to enjoy this class. I saw a picture of Mr. Blim online. It's kind of cute, I think. Too bad we're only in here for homeroom. The other girl nodded and scrolled through her phone. Brown hair, black roots, fake black eyelashes that accentuated her dark eyes, and a gold nose ring. Then, as if all the phones in the classroom were in sync with each other, a series of beeps and tings went off. Everyone looked at their phones and laughed. What's so funny? Katie asked Maya. The email. Mr. Blim just sent it to everyone in the class. Didn't you get it? No. What email? Katie scrolled through her mail, searching for something sent by Mr. Blim. Nothing. Maybe he doesn't have your email. A short, stout woman with a set of keys on a lanyard around her neck peeked inside the door. Excuse me, but is there a Catherine Debshire here? Oh, great. I think I know what this means. Katie walked to the door. I'm in the wrong classroom, right? Yeah, I'm afraid so. And I'm in Mr. Carter's class, right? Yes, it's right across. Yeah, I know. Katie slung her backpack over her shoulder and gave a brief wave. Just kid stuff, hey? You know this wouldn't have happened if you showed up last night. She stuck her tongue out at Maya and laughed, then walked across the hall to a more somber and quiet classroom. And this is where we have the 5 stars saying break in the scene. Katie closed her locker door and groaned. Oh, am I going over time? I just didn't know how much I should read, Sue.
No, you're good. I'm so into the story. Just keep going, Donna.
Oh, okay, good. I'll keep on going then. Katie closed her locker door and groaned. Missed you at lunch. Where were you? Maya asked. Had to spend it at the office, filling in some paperwork. Apparently my mom forgot to fill in a few forms they emailed last week. That's why I didn't know they had switched my homeroom and my classes. Fun stuff. Not. Maya nodded, then glanced down the hall. Katie turned to see the 2 new girls walking toward them. Maya smiled and waved. I mean, I get that my mom is busy, Katie said, but I'm tired of her working night shifts and not having time for anything else. Really? Maya said. I'd be happy with that. An empty house every time you come home from school. No one asking you stupid questions like, how was your day, sweetie? Any homework? Did you get an A+ on all your assignments? Maya laughed. The new girl stopped beside Maya. Hey, Katie, this is Bridget. Maya pointed to the tall blonde girl. And this is Megan. The brown-haired girl nodded and smiled. We're going to the mall. Want to come? Katie glanced at the girls and whispered, I thought we were going to the Black Rose. We are, but after. We can't go there until dark, right? Maya said. What's the Black Rose? Bridget asked. Sounds mysterious. Oh, it's nothing really, Maya laughed. It's just this old house we go to and do some crazy kid stuff, light candles, make up some silly chants. We started doing it back in 3rd grade. 2nd, Katie interrupted. Whatever. Anyways, we were young, and Katie thinks the reason she's in Mr. Cripface's class is because we didn't do the ceremony last night. Really? It was Megan who spoke. Katie stepped back and looked at her own feet. Funny how a person could just say one word and they were pegged from that moment on. It wasn't a, really? As in, wow, this sounds cool. Tell me about it. It was more like a, really? That is so lame. And what kind of immature person does that in the 11th grade? It's kind of a tradition, Katie tried to explain. It's not like we believe in it. It's just something we've done since we were kids. That's all. Well, I think it sounds kind of fun, Bridget said. Can we join you? Sure, Maya said. If you want to. Katie glanced at Maya, half hurt, half angry. It's really just something. It'll be fine, Katie. Come on, let's go. We can check out dresses for Semi. But what makes you think we'll be going to Semi? Katie said, stepping in behind Maya as she led the way. We can't miss the first dance of the year. It'll be great, and you know it. Maya turned and lowered her voice, looking Katie in the eyes. We're in the 11th grade now, remember? Yeah, it's hard to forget when you keep on reminding me. They boarded the city bus and sat. As Katie put her music on and looked out the window, Maya chatted with Bridget and Megan about Thomas and his friend Brandon, who just happened to sit with her at lunchtime in the cafeteria. I don't know who's cuter. I mean, Thomas is so close to perfect. But did you see Brandon and his biceps? She sighed and then laughed. Katie turned the volume up. The bus stopped at the mall and the girls filed out. What are you listening to? Bridget asked. Katie put her phone away. Oh, a little Beatles, some Grateful Dead, some Eagles. You know, good retro music. Oh, never heard of them. Maybe the Beatles. But don't you listen to new stuff? I mean, Eddie T or Candy or... I just like the retro stuff. Different beat, different style, you know. Oh, Bridget said with one eyebrow arched as if in disapproval. But Eddie T, yeah, he's pretty good. I mean, Bridget turned to Maya. Come on, let's go check out Exotica. I saw the cutest little red dress in there, and I've been dying to get in. Katie sighed and followed as Maya led them into the mall, past several retailers, and into a dimly lit store. Katie approached a mannequin attired in a short, sparkly blue dress. Why is it always so dark in these stores? Katie wondered. She widened her eyes at the price tag. So you can't see the prices. Megan looked at the astonished expression on Katie's face and laughed. Come on, Katie. Just enjoy it. Try on some dresses. You can't afford it. It's fun to dream, isn't it? Maya pulled a short burgundy dress from a rack and held it up to herself. What do you think? She asked Bridget. Oh, you have to try that one on. You'll look hot. And how about this one? Megan passed her a short black dress with spaghetti straps. It looks delicious. Maya took both dresses into the change room and came out minutes later wearing the burgundy dress. Her long blonde hair seemed to glow as she ran her hands down her sides and over her hips. It's perfect. Katie stared wide-eyed and quickly regained her composure. She had never seen Maya dressed like this. She always thought of her friend as pretty, but not beautiful. She knew she was always plain Jane when Maya went out with her. But now, how could she compare with that? She looked in the mirror and studied her red hair, freckles, and skinny nose, then looked again at Maya. Within seconds, the plain Jane and pretty princess duo now became the ugly duckling, and drop-dead gorgeous. Well, Katie, you like it? Maya asked. Sure, yeah. You look really good. But don't you think you need a larger size? You're kind of falling out of the top, if you know what I mean. Maya laughed and then looked back in the mirror, admiring her figure. I don't know, Bridget said. If I had it, I would flaunt it too. I think I'm going to get a boob job when I get older, but I have to wait until I'm 18, unless my mom lets me. I wouldn't worry if I were you, Megan said. My cousin said that years ago. Now she's a double D. Bridget looked at a display with stiletto heels on it. What size are you, Maya? 8. Bridget passed a pair of silver-strapped shoes to Maya. Put these on. Do the runway walk. Maya put the shoes on and walked out of the changing room and into the main part of the store. A young man looking through a rack of dresses stopped and stared. Work it, Maya. Come on, work it, girl. Bridget called out. Maya straightened her back and lifted her chin. She placed one hand on her hip and let the other fall to her side, then turned and walked back, looking more and more like a model than a girl in 11th grade. She stopped and leaned into Bridget. Do you see that guy behind me on the left? She whispered. Yes. Is he still watching me? Uh-huh. Good. She went into the dressing room, closed the door, and called out, Time for dress number 2. When Maya stepped out of the change room, it was as if Katie's longtime friend had been told to get lost and a new Maya had emerged. She had put her long blonde hair up with a couple of pins and left a few golden tendrils to fall onto her bare back. The dress shimmered as she walked, pressing her curves, showing a little cleavage and a lot of leg. It was not wasted on the man looking through the dresses on the rack. You're hot, Maya, Megan laughed. So hot. Maya glanced over at the man, and Katie followed her gaze. Black pants, black suit jacket over a dark blue shirt, hair just right, face more than perfect. He smiled, and Maya smiled back. Megan and Bridget picked out a couple of dresses and changed, while Katie lingered over a rack in a corner. Oh my God, Megan, Maya exclaimed. You're absolutely beautiful. That is definitely the dress for you. Katie looked up from the dress rack as Megan admired herself in a mirror. She wore a red sequins dress, short, strapless. A sales lady peeked inside the fitting room area. Her voice didn't disguise her irritation at teenagers trying on clothes they probably couldn't afford. Can I help you girls with anything? No, we're just looking for now, Maya said. We'll let you know if we need some help. Thank you. The woman sighed and left. Well, Bridget said as she stepped out of the change room, what do you think? She turned around in front of the mirror, admiring a gold satin dress with an open back that laced up in the front. I think I want to try it on, Maya laughed. Then noticing Katie, she stopped. Haven't you found anything yet? She shook her head as if annoyed. I'll help. She searched through a rack of short dresses and pulled one out and held it up to Katie. Oh my God, it's perfect. Try it on. Katie shook her head. You know, Maya, it's really not my style. Of course it is. Redheads always look good in green. Come on, Katie. Let loose once in a while. Maya pushed her into the fitting room. Try it on, and we'll be the judge. The girls changed and put the dresses on the return rack and waited. Okay, Katie, Maya said, come on out. We're waiting. Katie stared at her reflection. Perhaps the color did look good on her, but the dress only accentuated her skinny, knobby knees and her too long and thin arms. No, full-length dress with long sleeves might do the trick. Do you have something with long sleeves or... Let me see, Maya interrupted. Open the door. No, find me something that's not so trashy. An awkward silence came from the other side of the door. You mean I looked trashy? Maya said, obviously annoyed. Because I wore something revealing? Katie backtracked, trying to save face. No, I didn't mean you look trashy. I mean, it's not my style. The other dresses you put on were beautiful, but this one, okay, I'll find you something else, but you have to show us no matter what, Maya said. Katie imagined the look on Maya's face at that moment, rolling her eyes, shaking her head. Maya passed her dress over the door to Katie, mid-length, black, sleeveless, backless. Is this the best you could find? Katie asked. Yes, it's the best I could find, Maya said, revealing her impatience. Now try it on. Katie dressed and looked in the mirror. Maybe it did look okay. She groaned at the low back, revealing her freckled skin. Little girls have freckles, not teenagers in high school. I look ridiculous. You do not, Maya sighed. Come on, Katie. You're in the 11th grade. It's time for you to grow up. Katie's breath caught in her throat. The words stung. She pictured Maya staring at the changing room door, hands on her hips, challenging Bridget and Megan laughing. She tried to speak. Seconds passed. She sighed, opened the door and walked out. Okay, here it is. She looked down both sides of the dressing room. Maya? Bridget? Megan? She peeked into the store. No one. Just the guy at the counter purchasing a few dresses. He looked at her and smiled. Katie whispered, Great. Just great. Maybe you should grow up, Katie. She closed the door and changed into her jeans and t-shirt, left the dress in the changing room, and walked out of the store. The guy who had been in the dress store stood outside, returning his wallet to his pocket. You're not getting the dress after all? Katie shook her head. No. Too bad. You look beautiful in it. Kind of an Audrey Hepburn style to it. Classy, you know. Really? Yeah, but a redhead version. More sophisticated, I think. The guy paused and looked into the food court. Looks like your friends left you. That was rude. Yeah, well, teenagers. Good friends don't do that. Katie stared at the floor. Yeah, probably not. You seem a bit immature. Doesn't look like you're into that kind of drama. No, not really, Katie said. I've seen it so many times, the guy said, especially back in high school. Some girls just never grow up, do they? Yes, not. I'm sorry. My friends have told me I'm too friendly, but I'm Skylar, and you are? He put out his hand to shake Katie's. I'm Katie, she said, and returned the gesture. Pleasure, Katie. He held her hand for a second longer, then paused. I was thinking of grabbing a coffee right now. Had a bit of a rough day myself. Care to join me? We can both unload and see who had the crappiest day. Winner buys. Katie stepped back. No, that's sweet of you, but I really should get going. Are you sure? No pressure, I mean, just coffee. Katie glanced at Skylar and did a quick assessment. Perfect hair, perfect body, perfect smile. She could go home to her empty house or stay here with Mr. Perfect. So what if he was a few years older? And for sure, she was safe. Nothing could happen out in the open with lots of people around, right? She shrugged. Sure, why not? That's the end of chapter 2.
Wow. Thank you so much, Donna.
I always hesitate reading a YA book to adults because it's not a literary piece, it's a contemporary piece. So it's just something that, says it as it is. But anyways, yeah, it was a pleasure reading it to you. I haven't read it to anybody yet. You guys are the first, although I've had my editors look at it, but there. So it was a pleasure reading it to you. Yeah.
Well, it was a pleasure to hear it. Very, very, very powerful. You read it so well too. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thanks for listening.
Well, I hope you have better luck with the publishers and it's published soon and then we can all read it.
Yeah, I'm trying, and I've decided that if I don't get a publisher for it, I'm going to self-publish it, and I'm going to give the ebooks out for free, and advertise like crazy and get it out so that young girls are reading it. Because within the book, there's about 4 different ways in which girls are brought into prostitution. How they're lured into it, not knowing what they're getting into. So it's a book that will, young teens reading it will start to go, oh my gosh, I had no idea that's how it could happen. And then the books that are the hardcover books, I will give to different anti-trafficking organizations at cost, and then they can sell them at their workshops and things like that. So the books can get out that way too. Yeah.
That's a wonderful idea. Yeah, wonderful. Well, thanks so much, Donna.
Thank you.
All right. I don't know how Tessa does this, moves on so quickly. I'm still lingering in the story. Our second reader is Elizabeth Pszczolko. Elizabeth's a writer living in the woods outside Thunder Bay, Ontario. As a child growing up in northwestern Ontario, she kept scrapbooks filled with drawings, musings, poems. Now that she's retired from her medical laboratory work, she's dedicating more time to her writing. Her blog, A Wandering Little Voice, is the digital revival of those old scrapbooks. The drawings have been replaced with photographs, but the musings are still about nature and how we see and interact with it. She's a member of the poetry group Paratactics and currently serves on the Northwestern Ontario Writers' Workshop Board as Vice President and Secretary. She's had poetry published in NOWW magazine and The Walleye. And very, very pleased that she's reading for us tonight. Thanks, Liz.
Thank you all for sitting with us tonight. My story too is a bit about darkness and shadow and fading memory. It's a nonfiction memoir about my uncle and some of my family. It's called Pictures from Memory. I followed the signs toward 2A. The main hallways are bright, wide, and relatively quiet. So I'm surprised by the congestion and busyness on the ward itself. Everyone and everything in the smaller hallway moves. Trolleys loaded with equipment, patients on gurneys, patients in wheelchairs, ambulatory patients with intravenous poles on wheels, nurses and aides in a variety of pastel uniforms and running shoes, a practiced buzz that forces routine on events never really routine. I miss my time working in a hospital, miss being on the knowing side of all this versus the often helpless and bewildered side. I pass a patient's room. A frail old woman braces herself with one hand on the door frame. Girl, slim body bent with intent. She's dressed in a rumpled hospital gown and looks down the hallway as if searching for something. Her aureole of gray hair backlit by the afternoon sun streaming through the window behind her. "We'll find your pants, dear," says an aide, and gently leads her back to bed. The nursing station, a large curved counter weighted with racks of charts and lit with squares of blue computer light, anchors the diverging hallways like the hub of a wheel or spaceship. I wait for the clerk's attention, catching the spiky edge of complaint as she and a technician discuss handwritten notes on a scrap of paper. The nurses are gathered in the glass-walled report room behind the station, preparing for shift change. The clerk finishes her conversation with a sigh. "One more day and I'm done. Maybe I don't miss this after all." I say my uncle's name and she points to a door facing the nursing station. "In there, he's in the far bed." He sits neatly dressed in shirt, gray pants, and matching argyle pullover, an empty paper coffee cup in his hand. I'm surprised. I had imagined from my aunt's tearful voice over the telephone tubes, gauntness, a pale figure barely breathing. The only sign that he's an invalid are the gray slippers on his feet. He looks at me, puzzled for a moment, then smiles. "Ah, Elizabeth, I recognize you by your eyes," he says in Polish. Has the rest of me aged beyond recognition since I saw him just a few weeks ago? Or has my recent self faded in his mind and he can only reach for old photographs in his memory? I suppose eyes don't change much. I recognize him by what? Some familiar reference exists, condensed in this small old man sitting straight in his chair. The thin gray hair, still neatly combed back, contains the remnant spirit of the sleek black hair I remember, all the way back to the photograph of him taken shortly after the liberation. He had been given a job as a guard for the American forces, complete with uniform and rifle. You could see the swagger and dash, even in a still photograph, his garrison cap at just the right angle, a sign of the stubborn spirit that propelled him from running away from home when he was younger, through the war and work camps, and finally as a DP to Canada. He's lost his hearing aids again, so speaks loudly. "The whole family was just here," he says, "and you've missed them." He accuses his roommate, who's struggling to figure out how to operate the brakes on his walker, of being lazy for not picking up the towel on the floor by his bed. I pull up a chair beside him. He waves the empty paper cup like he's not sure what to do with it. So I take it from him and put it in the waste bin by his bed. Immediately, he reminisces about working in the bush, as if time had folded in on itself, and we had jumped back decades to when he'd quit his job working as a cutter for Kimberly-Clark in Geraldton and moved to Thunder Bay to work in one of the paper mills. About working in the bush? Awful, he says. How could your father have stayed on for all those years? The winters, the heat in summer, the bugs, the danger. Better to come work at the paper mill. Press a few buttons, nice view of the lake. He had worked at the Abitibi Mill on Lakeshore Drive. From the road, the monolith of brick buildings fed by a web of hydro lines obscured the view of the lake and the Sibley Peninsula of this reclining stone giant. From a window high in one of those buildings, the view would have been grand. Mist rising like a crowd of ghosts off the open water in winter, flotillas of sailboats in summer, salties and lakers powering around the feet of the sleeping giant from the world beyond. Nice view indeed, the promise of Canada fulfilled. About the cancer? Bah, he says with a wave of his hand. He feels good now. There's nothing wrong. The doctors don't know what they're talking about. My aunt told me about the transfusions he needed to replace all the lost blood, but I just nod. No wonder he seems so much like his old self. His roommate has finally figured out how to maneuver the walker, and his long legs and begins making his way across the room. He stops halfway, looking confused. Where's the bathroom? I point to the door to my right. He shuffles inside and closes the door. He's in pretty good shape, says my uncle, referring to the lanky roommate. Not bad for 86. My uncle is 92. The evening nurse comes in and introduces herself, Mary, and writes her name on the whiteboard next to my uncle's bed. She apologizes for the small windowless room. This was the treatment room, but we had to turn it into a patient room because we're running out of space. My uncle complains that he was cold last night. Mary promises to bring an extra blanket later as she checks his blood pressure, then leaves. His roommate comes out of the bathroom and sits on his bed, rearranging the towel on the floor with his feet. Lazy bum, why doesn't he pick up that towel? My uncle says quite loudly in English, then even louder, hi, how are you? His roommate nods and smiles at us. He fusses with the laces on his sneakers, untying and retying them. My uncle says in Polish, you are a good girl, like your father. He was a good worker. Even now, this fills me with the same pride and reassurance as when I was little, and yet the oldest among my set of cousins, the firstborn's urge to please and fit in with the adults. He was very, my uncle gestures with his clenched fist and growls softly. I was often the only kid at the parties my parents held at our house. Sometimes we'd go to the houses of the other Polish bushworkers, miners, and such, for parties in honor of a holiday or christening or funeral. Our family photo album is filled with pictures from these parties. Tables filled with beer and food and vodka bottles, ashtrays, the men in suits and ties, at least through the first part of the evening. Later, the jackets would come off and the ties loosen. The women in their best dresses. Someone always making a toast to something. Eventually, somebody would start singing old Polish or Russian songs. And of course, endless discussions of the war. How General so-and-so should have run the battles differently. What would have happened if the Americans had joined the Allies sooner, etc. These parties would often go on till dawn. I'd end up sleeping under a pile of coats on a bed somewhere. If at home, I'd wake up to tables full of dirty dishes, overflowing ashtrays, and few leftover partiers sleeping it off on the couch, or on one famous occasion in the bathtub. My uncle is married to my mother's younger sister. Both women met their husbands through correspondence. News of young women in Poland looking for husbands flowed through a network of immigrants here in Canada and the US. A lonely bachelor would hear through an uncle or brother or cousin of a girl back home, provide some proof of his own worth, a steady job, a car, and soon letters followed, along with glamorous studio photos of the women. The men would clean up and stand stiffly in front of a camera somewhere as well. Eventually, a visa and a wedding would be arranged. My uncle is also my godfather. I remember a picture of him holding me on my christening day, not the black and white ones taken in church, everyone looking serious as the priest in his lacy white vestments pours holy water over my head. A color photo taken later that day, well into the partying and vodka. I'm wearing a blue velvet dress with lace trim. My uncle is cradling me in his arms. His face is flushed and he's a bit bleary-eyed, his usually tidy hair tousled. That clenched fist and growl reminded me of the falling out between my uncle and my father. In my memory, it occurred on a bitterly cold Christmas Eve. We were having our family celebration at my aunt and uncle's house. I was about 8 or 9 years old. I don't remember what the fight was about. I only vaguely recall my parents and me having to leave suddenly into the cold night. My father and uncle didn't speak to each other for years after that, and there were no more parties they attended together. Another nurse comes in and speaks to his roommate. She must have been taking care of him for several shifts already and seems familiar with his habits. Don't go for any of your walks. I don't want you going and having to go looking for you. I'll be back with your meds in a little while. He struggles back onto his feet and makes it halfway across the room with his walker. He stops, looks confused, and asks, "Where's the bathroom?" I point to the door on my right. My uncle watches as the other nurse departs, and he grunts. She didn't bring the blanket. I explain that wasn't his nurse, and I'm sure that his nurse, Mary, will come back with the blanket before bedtime. He nods as if he understands, but the look in his eyes seems to say he doesn't quite believe me. He says again, I just missed seeing my aunt and cousins. They had been here earlier, and my aunt was due to come back after supper. He talks proudly about his grandson who's working in construction now, and his granddaughter who's trying to get into veterinary school. The roommate comes out of the bathroom and shuffles towards us. I like walking, he says. I need to keep moving. It's good to keep moving. He puts one hand on the tray table by my uncle's bed, like a dancer placing his hand on the bar, and proceeds to do several shallow knee bends. With the other hand, he smooths down the few wisps of hair he has left on his head. My uncle leans towards me, nudges me in the ribs with his elbow. He's in good shape. He nods approvingly. I see the attendant with the dinner cart coming along the hall. Time for me to go. My uncle gets up and escorts me to the door of his room. Old country manners. He shakes my hand formally as I leave. In the old party days, this would have been accompanied by one last shot of vodka and a song. Halfway down the hall, I turn to look at him, still standing in the doorway of his room. He seems to look content. He's holding his hands behind his back, a posture reminiscent of my father as he would stand observing construction sites. Or maybe he looks like someone on a ship, standing at a stateroom door, watching the other passengers going up and down the hallway. I have no idea what is really going on in his mind. Other than his difficulty recognizing me, I have not seen any signs of the dementia he's been diagnosed with. He has never revealed to me in any of our conversations the depression and paranoia my aunt and cousin have told me about, the twisted idea that my aunt is trying to poison him, the constant moaning about not wanting to live anymore. Maybe with me, he is on his best behavior. Maybe we are both interested in only looking at the same photographs from our shared album, the bright ones full of character and light. This visit with my uncle took place several years ago. He is now in a long-term care home. The cancer has not grown, but his memory has receded into that dark space that swallows up a life and only leaves a familiar body to care for. He had a blood clot in his leg this winter and almost died. With the current COVID lockdown, my aunt has only seen him through the window. She said he kept talking to his attendant as if asking, who are those people outside? He and my father eventually started speaking again. We were at a gathering following the funeral of one of their old Polish friends. The men were in the living room watching television, about 4 or 5 of them, my father and uncle among them, taciturn. One, more outgoing fellow, couldn't stand it anymore and joined the women in the kitchen, where there was talk and laughter and an open bottle of wine. When dinner was ready, we all gathered in the living room with our plates. I noticed some monosyllabic conversation had started among the men, and my father and uncle had been exchanging reminiscences. Some mysterious wall of pride had melted. I asked my aunt recently if she remembers what that long ago fight was about. We are the only 2 left who may remember. My sister was a baby, my mother and father gone, and my uncle's memory gone as well. Oh no, she said, that didn't happen at any Christmas party. She wasn't around when it happened. According to my uncle, my father was fishing on the highway bridge over Conogamis's Lake. Back then, in the late 60s, people to stand there to fish. The telephone lines overhead were full of tangled fishing line and tackle. Some Friday evenings, it seemed as if the whole town showed up to fish together. On this day, my uncle passed my father and said hello, but my father didn't respond. My uncle took offense. That's how their Cold War started, according to my aunt. Of course, she added, there are always several sides to a story. Could that really be what happened? What about the cold winter night? That feeling of tension and anxiety? Had I been remembering all these years? Whose memory is accurate? Had I created a drama in my own mind to explain the shock of being out in the cold after a party? The pictures and memories I have are like the stills shot on a movie set for publicity. The movie has since disappeared, disintegrated to dust in some vault somewhere. Whatever the reason, there had definitely been a breach. The awkwardness resulting from two men not speaking to each other was smoothed over by the women. My aunt and mom would talk on the phone regularly, visit each other when the men were at work. The best times were after my aunt got her driver's license. The two sisters and we four cousins would go to the beach for a summer afternoon of picnic lunches and wading in the swimming area of McLeod Provincial Park, safely surrounded by the floating buoys and rope and sunshine. Sometimes we'd go for a walk through the camping area. It seemed strange to see men camping with their families. Our world for that day had become a happy one of women and children only. Stoic men who held long grudges belonged in a different wintry world. Who knew what happened in that other world? I got glimpses when my father took us blueberry picking or Christmas tree hunting, and would sometimes stop at the site where his crew was currently working. He showed me the shack the three-man crew used in the winter to warm up in. A wood stove in the far corner and benches along two sides. Seating was determined by seniority. The least senior got the hot seat next to the stove. Next in line sat by the cold door, and the most senior got the seat across from the stove and away from the door. My father operated the skidder, the huge machine that dragged the logs out of the bush, which made him senior and the team leader. I got another glimpse into this world at my father's funeral. One of his old co-workers, a French-Canadian who had worked as a scaler for Kimberly-Clark, sat down with us to chat over sandwiches and tea in the church basement. He reminisced about my father, how he kept his crew in line by taking a guy aside and settling things with his fists. The clenched fist and growl must have been my father's signature, which my uncle recalled that with respect that day I visited him. I don't know if my uncle was ever part of my father's crew. I can't imagine them getting along for any length of time under the demanding conditions of bushwork. But maybe back in the early days, they did, and the incident on the bridge touched on an old grudge. My uncle, even before his illness, was a bit paranoid. He once banned my aunt from working at the Polish Hall on pierogi selling day because he thought one of the customers was flirting with her. As my uncle's health deteriorated, his paranoia increased. He imagined strangers breaking into the house and took to sleeping with a knife under his bed, near his bed. One of the last times I saw him in his home, he didn't recognize me at all. My aunt kept repeating my name to him and reminding him who my parents were, but he just looked at me with suspicion and went back to watching TV without saying anything. Later, after we'd had a small lunch together, my aunt brought out some old photographs. One, a large black and white studio portrait of my uncle in his post-liberation uniform, showed a handsome, if somewhat arrogant young man, his thick dark hair carefully brilliantine, his eyes sparkling. My aunt held the photo in front of him and said, "Who is this? Do you know who this is?" My uncle just didn't say anything, just shrugged and smiled in a sly, smirking way, as if to say, "You're not fooling me with your tricks." The end.
Thank you so much, Liz. That was wonderful. Wow. Yeah. We went all over in emotions there, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Our third and final reader for tonight is Peter Fergus-Moore. Peter calls Thunder Bay home, a place where he's done a majority of his writing and which continues to inspire him. Tonight's short story, Windy, is in the genre of horror and was written years before climate change became a climate crisis and before the current plagues erupted. It's a cry of rage and a dire warning, and asks the question, what might happen if the natural world tore up the contract with humanity? Very timely piece. Welcome, Peter.
Okay. Windy. Lacey hunkered down as small as he could get into the juniper thicket. The boat had stayed offshore past Skull Islet, beating across the bay back and forth all day like a cat watching a mouse hole. He didn't think they'd spotted him as yet, but no harm making sure. He glanced around carefully. His lookout lay near a point in a bay hemmed by gray slopes of rock on either side of him. Dark clumps of stunted juniper and spruce growth capped the old scored rock, and in these he had chosen his cover. Not a lot of it, but enough to hide in under a camo net, a prize from one of his successes. Not far away were the remains of the old Silver Islet community, now blackened skeletons and ash-covered foundations. Patience, he muttered to himself. No one's in any hurry here. Patience. They closed in on him just before nightfall, as the afterglow that had kept the July sky lighted for a good long while faded out. Not that they'd spot him right off, of course. Lacey was too smart for that. Still, with all the seasons he'd been wrecking, he didn't want to spoil a good thing now. Winter's too damned long here. People hungry. Him, too. The boat glided toward his hiding place. Not a large boat. Wind tech power, maybe 2 aboard. Count at least 1 unseen, the wrecker always figured. You could make out what looked like assault rifles, maybe a machine pistol or 2. He focused the binocs once more on the one he took to be the leader. Tough, square jaw type. Lots bigger than Lacey by about 2 people. But then Lacey'd always avoided showdowns, so maybe that wouldn't matter. Shifting his position under the camo net, careful not to let the lens glare give him away, the wrecker glommed the other one. Nope, the square jaw was the muscle, the lean one was the leader. The lean one scanned the bay around as though he knew every square and thought an enemy hid behind every wavelet. Lacey shivered, beat down an urge to go to ground into one of his 6 hideaways in the scrub bush south of the Shunia Desert. He needed to know all he could about this latest bunch and their boat, which might be his soon enough. Too late, the wrecker spied the telltale candy stripe antenna of the gear in the lean one's hand. The leader swung it in a gentle arc, scoping the rocks and bush of the bay into which the boat glided. Shit Lamard! They'd know he was here now. 1 notch of surprise gone. They might take him for a small bear, but not likely. There'd have to be bears around in the first place. But what the hell? His whole plan depended on showing himself sooner or later. The lean one undulated with the rocking of the boat and then stood up, arming what looked like a mortar. A stunner! Lacey crabbed away up the rock as quickly as he could to the nearest cave hideaway. As he stood to run, a hollow thud sounded behind him. 10, 9, 8, Lacey counted, frantically sprinting now along a barely detectable path through the spruce bush. 7, 6, 5, a few meters and he'd at least be underground. He slapped on ear caps. The cave grew closer. Closer. 2, 1. He flew, feet first, into the rock fissure just as the sound bomb blew the air out of his lungs. Lacey lay nauseated for long minutes, maybe more. Slowly, his breath began to return, even as his ribs ached. His head pounded. He could make out neither floor nor ceiling as his senses spun. That was close. Too close. One more like that and Lacey was game over, he knew. Gathering himself together best he could, Lacey wondered if they'd come for him now, or figure he was scared off, if not dead. He slipped off the ear caps, strained his hearing in every direction from within the narrow rock cleft. It wasn't his best one by any means. The wrecker knew he'd have to get deeper in the bush, hoping they hadn't brought a dog. Damn, he hadn't had time as yet to get this hideaway the way he liked it. Deep, well hidden, and comfortable for up to a week, like all the other ones. Shaking his head angrily, he listened harder. Shit, Lamard, footsteps. He sucked in his breath, made himself small as he could, still as a rock. Go past, he thought. I'm not here. No one's. The footsteps paused, then with a scrape, told him their owner had turned, as if searching. Lacey barely breathed for long minutes. You gonna come out, or do I throw something in? I promise you won't like it if I have to. The voice was male, deep, cheerfully secure in knowing who held the whip hand. Lacey weighed the options, which were pretty slim on his side. If he came out, the lean one would probably just have him flayed and left strung up for whatever came along, hungry enough to kill him. Or he'd die of thirst first. If he stayed, he was pretty sure the lean one had something very unpleasant ready, maybe another stunner, or worse. There was plenty worse. Somehow the lean ones got hold of the latest tech stuff to make themselves richer and most people even hungrier than before. I'm coming, he croaked, crawling through the cleft in the rock. He'd rather die in open air, he decided. Besides, there was always a hand roughly grabbed, hauled him out into the faded light. The world danced a little around his eyes. The stunner had done some damage, probably. He shook his head, gulped some more air. Looking around him, he now saw his captor, or captors. The lean one stood in front of him, eyeing Lacey closely without seeming to. The wrecker's heart dipped a bit. This customer wasn't going to be easy. A dark, slim, well-built youngish man who seemed to miss nothing around him. Lacey heard another footstep, then saw the muscle come into focus to his left. The big one aimed a machine pistol straight at Lacey's eyes from close in. An assault rifle was slung over his shoulder. The lean one quickly looped some nylon cord around Lacey's wrists, tightened them to the point of coldness, then did the same with his ankles. Both of them wore sun specs. Both seemed healthy, almost perfect. They were always perfect, with their latest tech boats and their latest tech gear, never a scar or sunken eyes from malnutrition, used to being in charge, used to pushing people around to get their way. Some of the old anger stirred in Lacey, sharpening his senses and his thinking. Wasn't there a third? Not that it much mattered by now, but there was still a chance. Well, let's start the music and see who will dance, he thought. Here for the silver, I guess, he muttered. The big one stiffened just a hair. Got one, Lacey thought. The lean one stayed motionless. He might have a plan of his own that didn't include muscle in the final tally. That might be the wedge point. What if we are? The big one cocked the pistol. That's fine, Blood, the lean one said suddenly. Ease off. Turning to Lacey, he said, Actually, we want to talk to you, friend. Lacey's eyes went to Blood, who had lowered the pistol muzzle the tiniest fraction toward Lacey's mouth. Lacey glanced back at the lean one. Go Albino. Blood reluctantly lowered the pistol, clicked on the safety, then turned and vanished into the shadowy scrub woods. Sit down, lean one said. He himself remained standing, holding another machine pistol aimed at Lacey's stomach. Lacey's eyes went to the pistol, then back to lean one's glasses. Lacey struggled to sit. Sorry, the man said in a way that meant the opposite. Got to take proper precautions, you know. I'm fatter, and you are? Lacey, not that that matters. True enough, Fetter chuckled. It's not who you are. It's what you know about this place. That's my interest. Well, like what? The silver's over there in the bay under the island. You can get that yourself easy enough, Lacey said. What else is around here? Scrub bush, tamarack and arbor vitae in the wetter areas, juniper and stunted spruce growth in the drier. Formerly mixed deciduous forest on sandy soil on dolomite rock. Power place in the Anishinaabe culture, later on a port for the mining company, later still summer camps for affluent Thunder Bay residents. And then calamity this and disaster that. Major clear-cut deforestation about 15 years ago. The Omega variant plague on top of that. Then climate migration north toward Hudson Bay. Wildfires wiped out the Silver Islet town site while we're at it. Lacey frowned inside. Fetter had done his research all right, but why were they keeping him alive if they knew about the silver? Nothing else anyone would want on that shopping list, unless Fetter was playing with him. Lacey decided, no, none of them ever played Who Came Here. It was always business, always business before death. So far the deaths had been theirs, but that could change, and probably would, very soon. At that moment, blood returned. With him was the third one Lacey had rightly guessed at, a woman, younger again than the other two, slimly built, well-muscled. Her pale blue eyes seemed to shoot a kind of ugly light into her surroundings. One of those intense ones, Lacey realized, trying not to stare. Don't cross her, not while there's a chance yet. You must have a use for this one, the woman muttered. I do, such as he is, Fetter replied. Find anything. Instruments show it's clean. She glared at the wrecker, who stared at the ground. So when do we, Blood said. Where's Hecate? Fetter snapped. Lacey shot a glance out of the corner of his eye, puzzled. A fourth one? Still doing a sweep around the town site. She'll be along any time. Ino started to sit. Fetter stiffened. Better call her in. He looked about him into the deepening shadows. But there's nothing on the instrument. Call her, Ino. All right, for Christ's sakes, the woman slipped a small cylinder between her lips and blew a small hiss of air. They listened for several moments. Damn, they had a dog, it seemed. They'd find his other hideaways for sure, maybe even... Call her again! You don't know what's out there! Fetter had lost some of the cool that Lacey had noted. What was he afraid of? The coyotes? Lacey knew from experience that the packs were farther north this time of year, in the highlands where some of the bigger trees had spared becoming part of the desert. Come to that, what did Fetter know about this place? She's coming, Fetter. She always has. Ino sounded disgusted, but her eyes spoke hatred. Blood, in the meantime, edged closer to Ino. Lacey, a small hope bubbled up in Lacey. These three were barely here an hour, and they're already close to scrapping, he realized. Might be easier to split them up than he thought. Well, let's play another card. There's a bear cave a ways northwest of the old houses, he said. Dog might have gone for a look. The three looked at him. There aren't any bears. Fetter turned to Ino. A bass bark erupted from the bush some distance away, cut off abruptly by a shrill scream. Bears! Shouted Blood. Ino was already running toward the sound. Wait! Fetter called. Blood shot Fetter a puzzled look and then slipped the assault rifle from his shoulder as he headed after Ino. Lacey clamped a lid on his feelings. Things were moving pretty fast, as they sometimes did. Just maybe he'd be out of this one sooner than he thought. Fetter, still tense, kept Lacey covered with the machine pistol in one hand while he fished a small hide pouch on a thong from the front of his shirt. The wrecker could see his lips move as the lean one then took another small sack from his jacket pocket. Opening this, Fetter sprinkled white grains from it around the two of them in a circle about 5 meters in diameter. Lacey's eyes widened. What did this guy know? How much? What you doing? Fetter hissed him to silence as he finished the circle. We might get lucky, the lean one murmured as he started to set twigs for a fire in the center of the circle. Then again, another scream. The woman. They heard a rapid pong-pong sound of an assault rifle echoing crazily off the rocks on the far shore. A ricochet. Another. It seemed to go on and on until silence. Another scream in a deeper voice. Silence again. There his food, Fetter muttered, working frantically to nurse a fire. Too bad about the dog, though. Wanted to keep her. When the fire rippled up through the twigs and bark kindling, he quickly gathered a few dead branches from around the clearing, piling them upwind of the small flame. And then he stood, taking some powdery dried leaves from his pants pocket. Fetter hurriedly placed them at 4 different points on the salt circle, muttering as he did so. Lacey froze. Shit Lamard, he thought, this one knows. The wrecker sat, his mind roiling like waves splayed against rock. This one knows. Lacey's one advantage, his one last surprise for the perfect ones, was gone. Desperately, he tried to think what else might work against Fetter, but this one seemed to have everything covered. At last, Fetter looked satisfied with his work. He hunkered down by the fire. Now we wait. For what? Lacey asked him. I think you know. Fully well. He stirred the fire, then dropped some brown, dried powder on it. A sweet tobacco scent mingled with the rosiny spruce smell of the smoke drifting up from the flames. The wood crackled, spat, hissed. Near them, somewhere in the light nearly vanished, a breeze stirred the branches of the tamarack. I'm not here for the silver, but I think you know that by now, friend. Lacey sighed in spite of himself. Let's see if jokers are wild, he thought. Nothing else left. You gonna untie me? The lean one took off his sun specs, gazed at him with black glinting eyes. Think I should? He added a twig to the flames. Like to sing my death song, Lacey played his card. The lean one considered that. All right. He produced a small knife, which he used to cut the knots on the cords. Lacey rubbed his cold hands and ankles as Fetter carefully coiled the remaining rope. A grudging spark of respect kindled in Lacey, who never wasted a thing himself if he could help it. Fetter walked to the edge of the circle, stooped, and placed the pistol just outside. He added a compass and watch along with some other things, finally his belt with a gleaming metal buckle. For a moment or two he gazed out into the dark bush as though waiting for something unseen. Lacey thought hard. Windy? He called in his mind. Windy, come here. Maybe it would work, even against Fetter's precautions. Meanwhile, Fetter glanced back at Lacey. No metal? He asked. None of this'll do any good, the wrecker shook his head. Fetter looked puzzled. No, won't do any good. All the bets are off. Fetter stiffened. What do you mean? A twig snapped from right behind him. Fetter wheeled toward the sound, tugging at the pouch around his neck as he did so. He froze. Not a couple of meters away stood something shaped more or less human. About the height of a tall man, the thing seemed made up of pale yellowish bones that gleamed wickedly in the firelight. The bones added up to a distorted human skeleton, except the skull bore glistening white teeth more like a bear's. Dark stains ran dripping from the teeth and from the twitching hands of the creature. It faced Fetter squarely as though looking right at him, its eye sockets empty, black. The humans could feel a fierce, cold energy radiating from the thing. Fetter stepped back a pace in spite of himself, gripped the pouch as though his soul depended on it. Je, he started to say. The creature advanced a pace. Drops of liquid from the gleaming jaws and hands tapped on the leaves of the bush. Won't do much good, Lacey piped up, his voice getting stronger, his hope swelling. All bets are off, like I said. Fetter started to shiver. Windy's tone deaf, Lacey chuckled. Don't hear the songs no more, Fetter. It's over. The creature advanced another pace to the edge of the circle. It clashed its jaws shut. The forest seemed to echo with the sound. Fetter froze where he stood, shivering violently. Windy don't mind the salt, neither. Lacey stood. Tobacco don't make no difference to him these days, or the medicine such as you got. He threw some twigs on the fire. Might as well see what we're doing. Fetter paused, gathering himself together bit by bit, and then he looked round at the wrecker. What do you mean, we? Lacey snapped a few more twigs in half, poking the fire until the light filled the clearing. The stains of the creature oozed dark red as the men's eyes could make out color in the light. Windy and me got an understanding, Lacey said. He rubbed his wrists once more, flexing his arms and legs. You see, we all gotta eat. Windy's like us that way ever since the singing stopped and the bush got turned into desert. And the white man, well, that's you and me, or maybe it's just me tonight, pretty much ruined everything around the world. Lacey threw another twig on the spitting blaze. Food's scarce all over, as you know, the wrecker went on. He paused, staring Fetter straight in the eye. The creature moved a little closer to Fetter. Well, maybe you wouldn't know. Don't look as if you'd know. But I do. He stabbed a stick in the creature's direction. And Windy here knows what it's like to go without a full belly most of the time. That's the nub of our understanding. You people come out here for the silver, or whatever it is you're here for. I came for Windigo, Fetter said. Lacey stopped, and then he began to chuckle. Well, what are you going to do? Put him in a cage? His laughter deepened as he let out all the cooped-up fear of the past hours. He shook his head. You don't understand, Fetter said. Lacey poked the fire some more, chuckling. I've heard the rumors around, Fetter went on. He even called up all the data I could as quietly as possible. It stayed with me night and day. I had to come and see if any of it was really true. It cost a fortune to get out here. Well, I've heard everything now, Lacey snorted the last laugh out, but you haven't. So you might as well hear the rest. It's short. He threw the last twig in the fire. Windy ain't yours and he ain't mine. He's Windigo, himself. Goes where he will and does what he will. You people come out here with your high-tech boats and stunners and firepower, and I get you in here for Windy. He eats his fill and I get your gear and whatever. And then we wait till, someone else comes along for the silver under this rock. That's what most of them want, even if you don't. I came for Windigo, Fetter continued, his voice an unnatural calm, his eyes brighter than the firelight, his face twitching. He turned toward the creature, now barely an arm's length away. Lacey could see Fetter's cheeks widen into a smile. What was the man? Crazy? I had to see for myself if the old ones had come back for real, if the rumors were true. Yep, they're back all right, but the old ways, they stayed dead. All the old deals between us and them gone down the chute. But the old ones, as you call them, they're here and hungry. He paused as Windy raised a skeletal arm. Its bloodied fingers, like bony knives, held rigid in front of Fetter's flushed face. And you're here, Lacey murmured. For long seconds, the bony hand stayed poised in front of the human, and then the fingers stabbed into Fetter's eye sockets. The man screamed, writhed as the creature lashed out with the other arm, breaking the man's neck in a blow. Lacey turned away from the creature's feeding. Save me some, he muttered. I'm hungry too.
Wow. Thank you, Peter. Whoa. That should have been a Halloween story. Oh, totally gripping.
Actually, I don't know if it's ever going to see the light of day anywhere, so you heard it here first.
Well, we're very glad we did. Thank you. All right. Well, we are we're done. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us this evening. Our next reading will be actually in the new year, January, February, and March. So we hope that you'll all join us then. And yeah, thank you very much. It's a wonderful night. And take good care and have a lovely evening. Thank you.